Chapter 24. Shang wished he'd had a chance to speak to Fen before the trial about his conversation with the Emperor. She was nearly fuming as they walked out of the courtroom. He might have laid a hand on her shoulder if he didn't know that she would have thrown the touch off. Her fear was anger. Her hurt was anger. Her heartbreak was anger. It was a challenge to get past that barrier. Shang had only succeeded a handful of times. He'd been more successful throwing a punch at her face than squeezing her arm in reassurance. "I have something to tell you," Shang said under his breath to her. "It's very important. Follow me back to my room." "If it's not about how we're going to be pardoned, I don't want to hear it," she snapped back. "You'll want to hear this, but Meiling is going to be waiting for us outside, so you'll have to be patient." "What do you mean she'll be waiting outside? She was sent away." They walked out of the double doors, and sure enough, there was Meiling, with a passel of guards, though the bevy of maids were nowhere to be seen. She was leaning against a beaded curtain, arms crossed. Her face, still wearing the ceremonial paint for the festival, was twisted in a scowl. Not an expression she wore often. Half of her hair fell unbound to her hips. The other half was arranged with strung crystals like stars in an updo. Fen shot Shang an incredulous look. "How did she know she was going to be here?" Meiling's gaze sharpened on him, her brow furrowing with the same question. "Because I know her," Shang replied. "And it is because I know her that I love her so dearly." Perhaps Meiling read his unspoken thoughts. Her neck colored, and for a second, she glanced away. "If she will have you, she is yours." Shang's heart had filled with hope to be thrice its normal size. If she wouldn't have him, he'd be that much more devastated. He didn't think he could bring himself to leave Suguan without her. Fen cocked her head, eyeing Meiling like she was prey that had fought back harder than she expected. "You either have no self-awareness, or you have more guts than I have given you credit for. Or you're stupider than a headless dragon." Shang exhaled slowly, reining in the sudden flaring of his temper. Why couldn't Fen say one civil word to the girl who saved her life multiple times on the road to Liafugun? "Guards have ears," he growled by way of rebuke, though he wanted to say much more. Fen struggled, her face darkening. "Not like anything matters anymore." Meiling pushed off the wall and hurried to them, beckoning her grumpy guards to stay put. Their attention shifted to Shang, but he only lifted a challenging eyebrow in response. When she stopped in front of him and Fen, she was struck again by just how much shorter she was compared to them. She wasn't especially short, but next to Fen, she barely reached the shifter's nose, much less his own. He liked her height. "I need to speak to you two," she hissed under her breath. Fen shifted her weight impatiently to one foot. "We're waiting." The words, characteristic of Fen, bristled. The tone, however, lacked her signature malice. That dragon-blasted shapeshifter actually harbored some genuine respect for Meiling. 7 valleys, finally, Shang thought. Meiling stepped closer, lowered her voice, and whispered, "I think you two should flee Suguan, so they cannot kill you." Shang's gut plunged to the floor. "You two? Not we." She wouldn't have forgotten his request from 2 nights ago that she flee with him. "It isn't a firm no," he assured himself quickly. She didn't have all the information, and he hadn't officially asked her to be his wife. Fen couldn't hide her shock when she burst. "Are you insane?" Meiling held her ground. "I don't want either of you to be executed. Not on my behalf. Not when you are innocent. Please, you must consider it. I've listened to the trials, and I'm so afraid that you will be killed." "We do not run like cowards," Fen spat. "We will face what lies before us. I will not live in dishonor." Shang winced at the unintended insult, even as he admired Fen's tenacity. Still, he needed to relay his conversation with His Imperial Majesty to them both. He was just opening his mouth when Meiling lifted her chin, defiance sparking in her lovely eyes. "I can assure you that death is worse than life spent in dishonor." Fen's eyes widened slightly as she realized the insult she'd dealt. For once, it hadn't been intentional. If anything, she looked chastened. Maybe she had more than just a little bit of respect for the princess. Shang took both of their elbows and marched a few steps further from the watching guards. If he hadn't saved Meiling's life only yesterday, her guards might have come after him. Instead, when he glanced over his shoulder, they'd only tensed, but made no move to follow. "I need you two to listen to me," he said, lowering his voice. "I was going to explain this in a more private place, but here we are. Meiling, I spoke to your father this morning, before you did." Meiling's eyes widened. Was that hurt flickering across her features? "I was going to tell you. I didn't get a chance when you were called away," he added, and she relaxed. He had imagined telling her somewhere private, just the two of them, had dreamed that if she agreed to marry him, he would kiss her without a shred of guilt. Alas, he would have to tell her everything except the part where she was supposed to come with him and be his wife. Fathers have mercy. The last person he wanted sitting in on that conversation was Hu Fen. "You spoke to the Emperor?" Fen hissed. Meiling shushed her, and they shot glares at each other. If the moment weren't so serious, Shang might have been amused. He really did like Meiling better this way. "He said he cannot get us pardons outside of the courts," said Shang. "But he—" "What kind of powerless emperor is that?" Fen snarled, almost successfully hiding the utter dejection that stole across her face. "If he can't—" "An emperor with a conqueror at his gates," Shang snapped back. "Now shut up and listen. He wants to smuggle us outside of the city before the execution." Shang's arm shot out as Meiling wobbled on her feet. She grabbed hold of his biceps in front of his robes to steady herself as he slid his hand around her waist. "Forgive me," she gasped quickly, her pupils dilating, her chest heaving. His heart lurched, ducking his head closer to her, silently asking if she was all right. "I didn't know Pa would—" She caught herself. "His Imperial Majesty would do that." Her voice was as unsteady as her feet. His heart broke a little for her in that moment. The way her father belonged to this entire empire, not just to her and her family. How difficult it must be to be the daughter of someone who was forced daily to make some of the hardest decisions a person could ever face. She had all but begged her father, with tears for his life and Fen's life, and she had believed he would choose Juninghai over her. Protocol over true justice. He didn't blame her for fighting to control her emotion. But her father was a better man than she even knew. She likely didn't have a clue how deeply he loved her. Shang wouldn't have minded if she'd clung to him a while longer. But she straightened, found her balance, and drew together her composure as Fen demanded. "The Emperor wants us to run? He wants to sweep us under the rug and banish us? Would you rather be killed and your family starve?" Shang tried to keep his tone even, but he couldn't help the flare of anger. If Meiling wasn't here, he would have used much more graphic language. He understood now. Honor, reputation, and success were so much less valuable than he'd always believed. They were helpful and good, but they were empty promises by themselves. If he was with Meiling, he could be a beggar in the streets, and he'd still be happier than he could imagine. "You have to choose what you want," said Shang, pouring the force of his belief into his words. "If you want honor, then walk yourself to your execution and face it without flinching. No one would call you a coward after that. But if your siblings, if your mother, if a chance for a future is what you want, then take the Emperor's offer. Run, and don't feel guilty for 1 second." A vein in Fen's forehead pulsed. She averted her gaze from his. Good. She was actually considering what he said. He turned back to Meiling, who stared up at him with enormous eyes, and those beautiful lips he couldn't help but admire. His throat turned a little dry. "You don't have to worry about us anymore." Her brow lowered. That subtle fierceness returned. "I still want you pardoned." "Then pray." She scowled. "Why did you admit to things in yesterday's trials that were false? You did not answer me earlier." "I answered the truth," he replied, frowning. "No, you didn't." He racked his mind for memories of yesterday's session, but details turned fuzzy. His attention slid away from the intensity of her scrutiny to fixate on the beaded edges of a scarlet curtain. "They always ask questions in a way that makes it sound worse. It does not mean it's not true. The only time I lie is to protect it." He wasn't about to say "your magic" in a hallway where anyone else breathed but her. Her forehead knit in consternation, and when she opened her mouth to protest, he stopped her. "Please, just trust me." He expected another scowl, another attempt to protest, but instead she tilted her head to one side, a string of beads falling with her hair at the movement. "Are you leaving then?" Shang couldn't bring himself to answer. She took it as an affirmative, his silence for sadness at their imminent parting. "When do you leave?" "His Imperial Majesty said the timing was up to us." Fen was studying her boots, her teeth clenched behind thin lips. Meiling glanced at her, then returned her attention to Shang. He wasn't expecting her to reach out and touch his elbow briefly. Gently, her gaze liquid with sorrow. "Don't leave without saying goodbye." With that, she turned and made her way back to her guards. Shang watched as she walked around the bend in the hallway, equal parts stunned, furious, and broken. Everything they'd been through, all the affection and care between them, and she could just walk away just like that. She could accept him leaving that easily. Then, just before she disappeared from view, she reached up with her long, trailing sleeve and wiped her eyes. He exhaled, the intensity of his emotions easing until they were bearable. For once, her tears brought sweet, sweet relief.
Chapter 25. Meiling thought she'd cried all her tears earlier. As it turned out, she had plenty more to pour out on her bedquilt. This was the best news she'd heard all week, that Shang wasn't going to be executed. Pa would make sure it didn't happen. So why was she so devastated? Because he was leaving. Forever.
"Would you come with me?"
She wanted to. Everything in her wanted to run away with him, to hide with him, to escape the coming storm. And yet, whenever she went to practice those words, "Let me come with you," her tongue cleaved to the roof of her mouth. It felt wrong. She didn't know why. Relief came in the form of her maids informing her it was time to prepare for the academy dance. She was nearly ready when a servant came to deliver a message.
"Prepare yourself, Highness,"
the servant said after bowing and being instructed to stand.
You testify in court tomorrow.
Meiling stared at the servant, her jaw falling to the floor. He shuffled, and belatedly she realized he was waiting for her to dismiss him. She managed a vague wave since her throat completely seized up, preventing any sound from escaping. He left. She was so lost in thought, in confusion, in wild, frenzied hope, that her maids addressed her several times before she blinked and looked up at them.
"The Crown Prince is here. He awaits you, Highness."
Oh! She scrambled to her feet, not bothering to check her reflection in the mirror. Ma had done it. She had worked some sort of magic of her own, had woven some spell over Pa or the judge or someone powerful. Fathers bless her. They stood a chance, and Meiling could correct the wrongs. She could make everything clear for the judge that Shang and Fen were innocent. Shang wouldn't have to leave. Her heart wouldn't have to be broken. Yun wore glittering royal blue, matching her own robes. Gold fire embroidery licked the edges of his garments, his robes split on the sides to reveal a peek at fire-orange trousers. The trousers were a little daring, but she doubted Yun knew that. Nothing rattled on her head tonight. She did not know what ornaments were pinned in her hair, only that her head was much more secure than usual for formal events. Thankfully, the paint hid any lingering traces of her earlier crying. Yun grinned at her, offering his arm. "Ready?" The fire danced in his eyes, lively and excited like a crackling, spitting campfire. His feet shuffled, and he tugged his robes straighter with his free hand. So much nervous energy. "Don't burn me," Meiling said, trying to keep the mischief from twisting up her mouth. "Only if you don't make me mad." "So, don't set How on you?" she teased. Yun's eyes widened with exasperation. "Did you hear what she did yesterday? Dragons, if she weren't a princess." He shook his head and kept shaking it. "That girl should have been expelled from the academy a dozen times over by now." "Do I want to know?" He genuinely considered it.
"Of course I want to know."
Meiling tugged on his arm with a laugh. "Tell me." "She planted fire spits on 3 masters' mats and another one under my head cushion, even though girls aren't allowed in the boys' dormitories. She's been insufferable ever since she learned she can make fire that doesn't burn." He growled under his breath, but it was half chuckle. "It's a good thing you don't have magic, sister. You don't have to deal with these things." It was meant to be sweet, and so she smiled, but her gaze faced forward. How little her own brother actually knew of who she truly was. The event was held at a pavilion outside the academy. She'd never been before and was immediately struck by the vast differences in clothing of the mingling attendees. There were enough people that no one was singled out, but they no longer wore the neutralizing white. The sons and daughters of wealthy, prominent courtiers were obvious, dressed in finery that rivaled Yun and Meiling's clothes. Social status was painfully obvious. Horns blasted when Yun guided Meiling under the dripping garland of roses forming the entryway. Immediately, her throat closed at the sight of so many people, so many warm bodies and staring eyes. At least Yun would never notice her hitched breathing. He grinned, and when she peeked at him, found him making eye contact and nodding at different people. Friends? Or random fellow classmates? "Lift your head." The strong voice in her mind urged her head up, made her fight her inclination to shrink closer to her brother and seek strength in his blazing warmth and surging power. He wouldn't notice if she curled in closer to him and lowered her eyes away from the darting stares, the averted eyes and uncomfortable shuffles away from her shadow. She raised her gaze. Though it took everything within her, she made eye contact with the students. Their smiles froze, faltered, or disappeared entirely when she did so, but she refused to keep cowering. She'd faced brigands, fongtserong, torture, near starvation, black dungeons, moagwe. Things these sapling youths could only dream of, could only discuss over the yellowed pages of ancient textbooks. She could face a few hundred strangers. Right? Anxiety pushed against her lungs, closed around them. Tighter, tighter. She shifted her gaze away from the people to study the candlelit pavilion and sunset-stained paving stones of the patio. Roses spilled from bushes, yellow winter sweet blossoms woven into the wooden lattices. Laughter, both friendly and cheering, almost overcame the Guchin music wafting from the corner. Any minute now, she expected Yoon to spot something exciting, deposit her in the middle of nowhere, and forget about her. But surprisingly, he led her through the parting crowds, giving princely acknowledgments as he went, and brought her toward a little dais in full view of the pavilion. "Here," Yoon said, giving her a hand so she could step up and make herself comfortable on the cushions. Food and drink were already spread on the table before her. Next to her, an empty cushion for him. "You don't know many people, so I made sure this was set up for you to have the best view of the dances. Unless, of course, you'd like to dance." He winked. She gave him a feigned glare, making him laugh. "Food, drink." He swept his hand. "Anything you like. I will be back later." He may not be considerate enough to stay here with her, to not abandon her amid strangers, but he had been considerate enough to make sure she was not entirely bored and comfortless. She smiled despite herself. And then she looked up as Yoon's tall form was swallowed up in the crowds. The walls of anxiety closed in again. Her heart rammed at full speed in her chest as she frantically searched the hundreds of faces for someone familiar. Where was Fei Yen? Of course, it was unlikely that Fei Yen would be here. She would be curled up in the library, half asleep as she studied. The music started, and she was glad she could feign interest in the girls skittering up the pavilion steps to take their place. They smiled and giggled, batting their eyelashes and twirling their skirts. They looked like regular girls, not magically gifted warriors in training. Meiling focused her attention on the dance, and decidedly not on the staring eyes boring holes into her head. They would wonder why she was here, why Yoon had brought her at all. There would be more than a few disappointed girls wondering what was so wrong with them that Princess Meiling was the crown prince's preference. 8 girls danced. She quickly noticed the best dancer in the group and was not surprised to discover by her clothes that she was a nobleman's daughter. The girl was much less concerned than the others about tossing simpering smiles at the audience, and instead focused on letting her eyes follow her movements and bringing each graceful arc to completion. She was beautiful, with a long, elegant neck and a tall, willowy form. Was she powerful, too? Did her grace belie hidden strength and prowess? What sort of magic did she wield? Her obvious high birth indicated she was probably born of a long line of powerful wielders. Meiling couldn't bring herself to watch any of the other young women. Her eyes were glued to the one. She soon forgot the judgmental stares and her own aloneness. The dance ended. The girls bowed and abandoned the stage as a new crop of giggles took their place. Her eyes still followed the one girl and found that she walked as elegantly as she danced, languid like a cat. She walked, chin high with the confidence of 1,000 kings, and made her way directly to— Oh, dragons! Shang was here? She sputtered on her tea and accidentally clattered the cup back down on the table much too loudly for a princess. She ignored her own flush of embarrassment, the extra eyes that snapped to her at the sound, and tried not to let her gaze widen with too much visible shock. Apparently, she'd been wrong to assume that because he wasn't a student anymore, he wouldn't be here. Shang wore blue. He was far across the courtyard, which was why she hadn't seen him earlier, surrounded by a group of wielders. He was taller than those next to him, except for the one man standing beside him. Zhenshu. That meant he had been cleared of Zedong's curses. Perhaps the rest of the prisoners were free and safe now. Relief like warm water ran down her spine. Her shoulders relaxed. Fen was nearby, though not in Shang's direct circle. She was surrounded by her own group of friends, laughing with her head thrown back, and it made Meiling realize she had never considered how popular Fen or Shang might be. From the looks of it, very popular. The girl strode straight up to Shang and said something to him. He nodded back, smiling a little. Was it Meiling's own stupid, hopeless heart that made her think his smile was more polite than genuine? He leaned back, arms crossed with a goblet in one hand. He said something back to the girl, and the others laughed. Even the girl. While she watched, a couple more girls strode up, and even from this distance, Meiling could discern their object of attention. Shang, however, hardly glanced at them, before turning to Zhenshu and saying something with a smirk to him. Zhenshu leaned toward his ear, and his reply made Shang toss his head back in full laughter. The girls laughed too, though Meiling wondered if they had even heard the joke. They had no idea that only 2 nights ago, he'd held her in his arms and told her he was a failure, or that just hours ago he'd been on trial for his life. One could not blame them, considering the composure he kept. How he managed it was beyond her. When she had agreed to come to this, she had not thought she was agreeing to come watch Shang socialize among his friend circles. She had not thought this was going to be one huge reminder that she did not belong in this world. It was supposed to be a step toward moving past everything. Shang looked up, directly at her. Immediately, instinctively, she dropped her head. Her white-knuckled hand clutched her empty teacup. The heat of the summer sun bloomed in her cheeks, despite the winter cold. Was he still looking? She had to know. Her gaze darted up and across the courtyard. Something burst like 100 fluttering wings in her belly when she found him staring straight back at her. A tiny, breathy gasp escaped her, but something about his eyes refused to let her blink away. So she held his gaze, her heart pattering faster and faster, as Shang straightened, nodded to Zhenshu, and strode between the collecting audience of young female wielders. He was coming here. To her. Phoenixes scorch everything. Now she would be even more conspicuous. Now her own awkwardness and fear would be on display. He would bring attention to her distinguished disgrace. And now she knew. Now she knew she loved him and could never, ever have him. Shang smiled at her in greeting, still carrying his goblet, and her mouth went dry as sand. He bowed deeply. As he rose, she blurted, "You shouldn't."
The princess does not dance.
He asked, cocking his head innocently as another smile played on his features. She sputtered for a moment, glancing around the courtyard to see the dozens of turned heads and raised eyebrows. She found her voice, though it came out sharper than intended. "I am not a show-off." He grinned and gestured to the edge of the dais.
May I?
He did not presume to take Yoon's seat, but he still asked to sit beside her. She could only nod. Rebelliously, her eyes sought and found the tall beauty who had danced earlier and discovered her staring straight this way. Her mouth did not gape like her companion's, yet she still looked perplexed.
One could never accuse you of being a show-off,
Shang said once seated.
But it is such a waste of your skill to let these other girls dance without you joining a single time.
My skill? She asked, tilting her head and frowning. You have never seen me dance.
Are you not a princess?
Meiling pried her hands off her cup and stuffed them into her lap, smiling as she shook her head. You know I am not versed in the typical accomplishments of a princess.
You evade me. I'd bet 3 months' salary, nay, a whole year's salary, that you are the finest dancer here. Yet unless you dance, others will think they are the best. They will think the princess does not dance because she is not good. But I know the princess does not dance because she is shy.
Shang took a great draught of wine, as though oblivious to the effect his words had on her. He sighed and set down the goblet, planting a square hand on his knee.
Were that more people did not crave notice like you.
She could have sworn that his gaze flicked to the tall beauty. Meiling did crave notice, but she'd learned that the notice she garnered wasn't the type she wanted. "Where's Feyen?" she asked instead of responding, returning her attention to the delicacies laid on her table. Though she intently studied them, she did not see them at all. They were blurry distractions from the black eyes beside her.
Probably studying.
Shang shrugged. He cast a sidelong glance at her.
You look lovely tonight, by the way.
What? Meiling's head swiveled sharply, her gaze latching onto his. It was hardly a dignified response, but she was too stunned. He thought she... A flush crept up her cheeks, so hot she was certain she was turning all sorts of telltale colors.
I said you look lovely,
he replied, eyes bright and full of something she dared not name. The faintest trace of amusement lined his handsome features.
Not to imply this is anything out of the ordinary, as I've always found you lovely. But tonight, you look especially so.
She was going to fall right off the dais. At least that would give her a reason for her flaming cheeks and an excuse to flee the premises. She ducked her head and clasped her hands much too tightly in her lap, dragging in a deep breath as she tried to regain her composure. "Oh, thank you." Mercifully, he shifted his attention away from her and nodded his head toward the pavilion.
Look, they are lining up for another dance. You should join them.
Join them? She balked, latching on to something other than his overwhelming compliment, and immediately shook her head. No, definitely not.
And let these idiots gloat? Show them why they ought to respect you.
The words were spoken nonchalantly, but when he took another sip of his wine, his eyes found hers over the rim of the goblet. That look. She knew that cool, calculating glint. She watched the pavilion fill up as girls clambered up the steps and took their place. It was mostly full. Relief mingled with the wild hammering of her heart. "I'll do the next one."
No, do this one. It's a harder dance, and the most skilled dancers will be lining up.
"It's too late, see?"
It is not too late.
He scoffed and gestured with his arm toward the pavilion. Meiling swallowed, her hands suddenly turning clammy and a cold sweat breaking out at the nape of her neck. She changed her tactic. "You have great faith in me."
Of course I do,
Shang growled.
Go join them.
"I told you I'm not a show-off." He rolled his eyes to fix her with a glare.
Meiling.
Fine. With each breath practically a gasp, with her heart threatening to gallop straight out of her chest at every beat, with her legs turned to noodles, she stood. "If I embarrass myself," she snarled under her breath, "it's your fault." Shang grinned and stood to offer her a hand down the dais. At his touch, her knees wobbled, which did not bode well for the impending dance, and she tried not to think about the warmth and strength of his hand holding hers, nor the rough warrior's calluses against her much softer fingers. She did not look back at him as she made her way toward the pavilion, forcing her hands straight to her sides and her chin up. The music was already starting, but it was only the introduction. Her arms shook as she gripped her skirts to climb up the stairs, and it took all her strength not to let her shoulders sag when the last open spot was near the tall beauty. The girl gave her a hesitant sidelong glance as she took her place. Only then did she look back and find Shang's gaze. She maintained her composure, despite wanting to glare at him. He gave an encouraging smile. The dance started. Suddenly, She desperately did not want to let Shang down. What if the girl next to her was better than her? Meiling never danced in public these days, and this girl looked like she was quite accomplished at public dancing. But had this girl learned the name of a phoenix? Had she delved into the depths of minds and dreams? Not that those things had anything to do with dancing, but somehow they gave her the strength to close her eyes and lift her arms. She danced. That was when she heard it. The voice. The low, masculine whisper.
Dance among the winter sweet, daughter of Lyanna.
Meiling's eyes flared open, but she kept moving in time with the dance, with the music. As she danced, she tried to search the courtyard for the source of that voice. It was the only denial she could afford. She knew very well the voice wasn't in the courtyard. She looked toward Shang and found his face. She couldn't guess what that face meant. His eyebrows were barely lifted, his eyes dark and rounded on the edges. His lips parted slightly. She closed her eyes again.
How lovely you are, daughter of Lyanna. Enjoy your last days of beauty.
Open. Dusk burned against torchlight, and the yellow flowers mingled with red roses. Closed.
Did you think I wouldn't come for you?
She almost choked, but a glance at the girls dancing with her revealed that whatever was spoken was to her alone. She should break out of the formation, curse Shang and his encouragement to dance, and hunt down that voice in her mind. Why now? Why did Sarong speak now? She pursed her lips. Maybe she ought to listen. Steeling herself against the chill of his words scraping in her mind, she closed her eyes. That familiar voice filled her once more. How far away it sounded.
Have your people accepted you like I did? Have they kneeled in reverence as you deserve? Will they let you prove your worth? Sweet Meiling, you know I never questioned your worth.
Poisonous lies. Meiling seethed under her breath. The tall beauty next to her snapped her gaze down to hers, and Meiling met it with the searing furnace of anger now burning in her core. The beauty's eyes widened slightly.
Dance among the winter sweet, daughter of Lyanna.
What do you want with me? She shot back in her mind. A surprised, rumbling chuckle answered her. She could almost see his grin, his close-shaved beard, his cloak billowing in the wind behind him. Could almost feel the power emanating from him, that black magic encircling his mind, protecting him from her reaches.
Perhaps I could forgive your rebellion.
I cannot do likewise, she retorted. The voice rumbled with laughter again.
How valiant you are when protected by the safety of distance.
Why are you in my mind? The music swelled to a crescendo, and Meiling knew her movements must be more jerky, more angry than graceful. She didn't care. Did not care if she proved herself the worst dancer on stage.
I thought you might miss me, sweet little Meiling.
Liar. That raspy laugh again. How are you in my mind?
I think you know how.
Had Sarong somehow mimicked her magic? Where are you? She tried to keep the frantic note out of her mind voice, but it permeated nonetheless.
You want me to tell you and spoil the surprise?
The music ended. She found herself bent at the waist, still in her spot on the pavilion in the line of girls, one arm lifted with extended fingers. She was panting, dripping sweat, despite the dance being only mild exertion. People blurred together, lanterns flickering brighter as the sun at last slipped behind the mountain. The courtyard plunged into night, and suddenly the smell of bodies and the fragrance of flowers cloyed in her nostrils, thick and nauseating. She closed her eyes. The voice inside her head was gone. Chapter 26. Meiling spared one glance Shang's way as he stood and started toward her, a frown etched into his face. This place was too full, too peopled, too distracting. She nearly suffocated in fluttering silk as the girls dispersed from the pavilion, with more scurrying up the stairs in their wake. She barely had the presence of mind to hold her head high, to temper the speed of her steps, to be a princess. Yoon was nowhere to be seen. She craned her neck, searching for him, trying to use the last bit of height before she stepped off the lowest stair and was lost to her own smallness. People. They were lambs for slaughter. Idiots! Dancing their way to their graves in their flaring and flashing garments. Where was Zerong? Was he here already? He'd sounded so distant. What had he said?
Enjoy your last days of beauty.
As Meiling pushed through the crowd, taking the direction to the nearest escape from the courtyard, a wild hope bloomed in her chest. Days. Did that mean Zerong was still days away? Not minutes? Not prowling the palace even now? Or did he only say that to relieve her urgency? Why had he even bothered to talk to her? She ducked under an archway of wintersweet, only the small, pale blossoms visible in the night by torchlight. Immediately, as she left the courtyard, cold blasted her. It knifed into her lungs, and she gasped, though not in pain. She welcomed the cold, welcomed the barrenness of the night after the engorged courtyard, welcomed the silence, with only the distant wafting of laughter on the wind. Where was she even going? Away. Away from the people, the voice. Something hissed near her foot. She leaped aside, another gasp bursting from her lips. Then behind her, scuttling, coming fast up behind her. She broke into a run. She tore deeper into the academy gardens, deeper into the darkness. The sounds of crawling, scurrying bugs filled her mind, and as she ran, they seemed to coalesce into words.
I'm coming for you.
She wanted to scream, but if she screamed, Zerong's magic would find her and devour her whole. So she ran harder, chest heaving for the splintering cold air. The gardens were left behind as she raced over a bridge, over a reflection pond full of lilies she wouldn't have noticed except for the white shining under the moon. She'd reached the academy, the long set of buildings for lectures and training and dormitories. Someone would see her running for her life. They'd think her mad. She couldn't care. She ran harder. Something grabbed her shoulder, dragging her backward until she nearly screamed as a band like iron clamped around her waist and tried to pull her to a stop. When she fought, she was lifted right off her feet, her cry dying in a choking burst of panic. She struggled violently, throwing her elbow back until it connected with a rib. The grip on her loosened just enough that she nearly broke free. Then her wrist was snatched. The world spun. She landed hard with her back against the wall of an academy building, wrists gripped and pressed into stone near her head. A whoosh of air escaped her open mouth. She looked up.
Spattering blood curses! What are you doing, Meiling? It's only me.
She gasped again, both from relief and the need for air. Shang, she managed, and her head sagged forward from her shoulders as he kept her pressed into the wall with hands that burned of ice. You scared me.
Meiling,
he growled, tightening his grip and leaning his face down closer to hers.
What are you doing? Why were you running like you have a chileen on your tail? Why did you leave?
She tilted her face up, but shadow shrouded his face. Only his black eyes glittered in the night, so near her own. Her breath snagged. She had to break his gaze or lose her mind entirely. Zerong was going to catch me. He was chasing me.
No one was chasing you, except me.
It wasn't you. Meiling squeezed her eyes shut against the intensity of his. Something else. He was in my mind. During the dance. Shang released her wrists, letting her arms fall to her sides, and stepped back. When he remained silent, she peered up at him to find him looking off to one side, a muscle jerking in his jaw.
He spoke to you? In your mind?
He asked, bringing his gaze back to her. Black eyes seemed to bore into her, no doubt looking for any evidence her words were false.
What did he say?
He told me to dance among the winter sweet. The air between them froze, making her shudder.
Anything else?
Shang ground out between clenched teeth. She told him everything Zedong had spoken to her mind, including her speculation that he was not here in the capital already. She'd hardly finished speaking when his eyes flared wide and snapped sidelong.
Someone's coming,
he hissed. Before she could react, he grabbed her elbow and pulled her after him to a shadowy crevice between buildings where the moonlight did not shine. She tried to arch her neck to see around him at what he'd heard or seen, but he dragged her into the darkness and set her against the wall. One of his hands planted above her shoulder, the other gripped her arm. His looming body was twisted, half shielding her and half watching for whoever approached. Why are we? He clamped an icy hand over her mouth, his exhale stirring the top of her hair. When she shivered, he glanced at her, then released her mouth. They huddled in the shadows as she finally heard the approaching footsteps. At the sound, she looked up at Shang's face. He was so close, she swore she could hear his heartbeat. But perhaps she heard her own, roaring with life and fear and heady emotion. She peered around his arm, trying to catch a glimpse of whoever was stalking the grounds at this hour. A straggler from the dance, like her? His tension radiated through the hand on her arm, filling her with his battle readiness. The footsteps stopped. He gripped Meiling's arm tighter. Ice flared into her elbow. She jolted involuntarily. The footsteps started again and continued until they faded into the night. Slowly, the tension eased out of Shang. The air warmed, and the ice leaked from his hand. He turned his gaze from the courtyard down at her and seemed to startle when he found her staring up at him. His eyes widened almost imperceptibly as he registered their closeness. But he didn't pull away. If anything, he pressed closer to her. "They're gone," Meiling whispered, her voice cracking slightly. The power of his eyes locked on hers was enough to make her melt and burn simultaneously.
"They're gone,"
he assured, his voice deeper than usual. His eyes glittered like stars, the rest of him cloaked in shadow and darkness. A soft tendril of wind, whispering of winter, brushed her hot face. It was nowhere near as cold as his touch on her arm. She couldn't break his gaze. She thought. His thumb brushed her arm in a soft, tentative caress. Once, twice.
"Meiling."
His voice was husky. Her knees went weak, and her eyes must have been as wide as moons in their sockets, mouth open with disbelief and ragged, desperate hope. She meant to say something, his name perhaps, but the sound died on her lips. He let go of her arm, and slowly, hesitantly, he reached up with two cold hands. She felt the ice before it even brushed her skin, radiating in the air between his fingers and her cheeks. She closed her eyes as a tremulous, shuddering gasp escaped her lips when he cupped her face. Immediately, the ice vanished, replaced by warmth, heat.
"Meiling. Oh, Meiling,"
Shang whispered, his voice so soft, but urgent, painfully earnest. His next words came rushing out as though they'd been pent up for some while.
"You cannot know how deeply I love you."
Everything stopped. It was like entire worlds died and were reborn in that mere second. They danced on this cliff edge for far too long, and now they were falling. She never wanted to land, never wanted to feel solid ground beneath her feet again. This moment, this tiny piece of forever, was where she wanted to belong. After one ragged inhale, he was speaking again, leaning his forehead against hers.
At night, when I fall asleep, I dream of holding you in my arms, kissing your sweet mouth. I think of your beautiful eyes, like stars in an endless sky. Oh, Meiling, I want nothing in this world. Nothing but you.
Her lashes fluttered with disbelief and overwhelm as she gasped, "Shang!" Their eyes met. He leaned forward, lowering his face to hers. His mouth brushed her forehead first in a kiss gentle enough to make the stars weep. His second kiss, pressed to her cheek, sent tingles racing down her spine. The softest brush of his mouth on hers, and she couldn't hold back her own heart from spilling forth. "I think I have loved you from the day you told me your name, Tang Shangdi. I have loved you, and I love you, and I will never stop loving you." The rush, the pure glory of those words sent her leaning closer, dizziness nearly overwhelming her. His reply was almost pained as one hand slid down to her waist, as he pressed her into the wall and let his breath caress her lips.
You don't mean that.
"I do indeed," she insisted, almost weeping and laughing simultaneously in her sincerity. Her entire body was shaking. "I didn't love you then as I do now, but Shang, I have longed for your regard, for your love."
You have it. All of it.
He growled. Then his mouth claimed hers with such force she might have been knocked off her feet without the wall behind her. For the first time they'd kissed, she was wide awake, yet she felt as though she were dreaming. Her hands moved to wrap around his neck, pulling him closer as their lips moved in perfect cadence. He groaned her name, a low, guttural sound that imprinted itself on her heart. She might have said his name in reply, but he'd already stolen her lips again, and there was something frantic and desperate about the way he kissed her, as though he waited for the moment she'd be stolen away from him.
Be my wife, Meiling, my darling, my own,
he whispered urgently. "Yes," she breathed, not considering anything but her own longings in that moment. His reply was an exuberant, passionate kiss that filled her entire soul, and then he was murmuring over and over again,
I love you, I love you, I love you, I love you.
Another jubilant kiss that was more like two grins crashing together.
I could say it thousands of times and it wouldn't be enough.
She dragged open her lashes to find his handsome face still so close, his shoulders blocking out the world beyond their wonderstruck bliss. The world beyond. Zedong, the trial, war. Meiling froze. Shang's hand on her hip went still, his mouth halting just above the apple of her cheek. She could barely get the horrible words out. "But you're leaving." Shang took a deep breath, his broad chest expanding against hers.
Come with me.
He said it so simply. If only it was simple. "Pa wouldn't let me go with you," she said to avoid the real question. Shang cupped her face so gently, it was almost as if he wasn't touching her at all.
That was part of our conversation this morning. He said I could take you with me if you wanted to go.
What? For the second time today, she was floored. My pa said that? He would let you take me away from Junning High? He agreed to never see me again?
He didn't want to, but he said you should have a say in your future. So he left the decision to you. If you want to stay, you can stay. But if you want to come with me and be my wife, you are free to do so. We could go to the Southern Isles. You could see the world, May.
His soft voice was almost grating against the pounding behind her eyes. This should be an easy choice. She loved Shang, loved him so much. She would be safe with him. Far safer than she'd be in Junning High. She could make a home among people who didn't despise her. So why did her entire being demand that she say no? Saying no would mean giving Shang up forever. And she couldn't, she wouldn't give him up. He'd only belonged to her for a few minutes. She couldn't say goodbye to him, to his strength and will and cunning and affection. The pounding grew to a splitting pain.
Meiling?
His voice was worried, and it faded in and out of her awareness. She squeezed her eyes shut. A new voice filled her mind, poisonous and deadly.
Go with him, darling May. I will let you have a few beautiful years with the man you love. Then I will come for you, for him, and your children. I will bring you back to Junning High. You will see the new society I have set up, and you will see your mother once again. The rest will be gone, but she will be mine. I will let her hold her grandchildren before I kill them.
Get out of my mind! Meiling snarled, grabbing her head and digging her fingernails into her scalp. Get out! At once, every last trace of Tserong's voice vanished. Shang had her by the shoulders, demanding to know what she'd heard in her head. Scorching rage filled her to the brim. She was going to tear Fong Tserong to pieces for threatening her and her family like that. And there it was, the buried part of her that had hidden for so long. The part that could kill and not be sorry. She'd found it at last. Her eyes flashed open, meeting Shang's hard stare. And though it was like 100 knives into her heart, she didn't falter as she broke them both. I won't go with you.
Why?
He demanded, and there was a world of hurt and anger in that word.
Did Feng speak into your mind again? What did he say? Why won't you come with me?
Because Tserong isn't after Junning High. He is after revenge. Revenge against my mother. And I am part of that revenge. No matter where I go, he will come for me. Did I ever tell you why he kidnapped all those wielders? It was partly for their magic, yes, but mostly it was to prove that he could capture, break, and destroy the strongest of my father's warriors.
So what?
Shang snarled.
You are going to just sit here and wait for slaughter? I saw the Emperor's plans for fortifying the city. They're good, very good, but I'm telling you, Meiling, they will not be enough. Feng is going to take this city, and you are just going to wait here for it to happen?
I know you think I'm useless, but
you are not useless, and I've never once thought that you were. You are my treasure, Meiling.
His voice broke, his brows slanting and pleading.
I won't make you come with me, but help me understand. You're powerful, more powerful than any of us know yet, but you're at your most vulnerable when you're wielding that power. All someone must do is find your sleeping body, and they can kill you without a fight. If you're staying back to prove you're not useless, there are other ways to do that without throwing away your life.
They don't know Tserong like I do. I've been in his mind. I know the boy he was and the man he is. No one in that palace understands him like I do. Not even Ma. And if I don't—
Why has fighting Feng Tserong fallen to your shoulders?
Shang demanded.
This isn't your responsibility, and it never has been. You owe nothing to Junning High.
He just told me that if I ran away with you, he'd hunt down our children and kill them. Meiling shot back. Shang's eyes widened in stunned horror as she continued. This is what I'm trying to tell you, and this is what no one seems to understand. Tserong is coming to Sugwon to destroy me, so he can destroy my mother. He stared at her, shell-shocked, as though fully comprehending. Then, in a voice that was almost lifeless,
we need to break the connection he has with you. We have to get him out of your mind.
I don't think we can. We were just kissing, which should have already broken the connection, but it didn't. Under any other circumstances, she might have blushed at the words. Now they only brought pain. I believe he's mimicked my power through black magic. He had me working to understand the magic of the captive wielders, and perhaps mixing it with a mimic of Du Lucien's evanescing magic to cross the distance. So what is there to do but listen and hope I can glean important information when he chooses to speak? Shang's jaw worked, and when he spoke, his voice was like death.
I will kill him.
Zedong probably wanted him to try, which terrified Meiling almost as much as Zedong's threat to murder her children. She was done letting him destroy what she loved.
Chapter 27. Shang was such a storm of emotion. There was no hope of building back his composure. He was sliced open, his heart bloodied and raw, and though the pain wasn't physical, he couldn't imagine ever healing. To fall from such heights of exaltation to such depths of woe and misery. All he wanted in this life was Meiling. Now he couldn't have her. What was he supposed to do now? He could escape to the ends of the earth, and where would the solace be in that? He would never love again. That was for certain. But he shouldn't be so selfish as to fixate on his own heartbreak. There were bigger things to worry about, and he needed to get to work. With this new information, he had a clearer understanding to aid in offering his suggestions to the Emperor for city fortifications. And if Meiling was determined to stay, then by all the fathers and lights above, he'd make sure this city had every chance of standing. He couldn't have her? Very well. He would be what she needed. Meiling seemed to sense his agony, and the way he tried to compartmentalize it, because her face softened. Her fingers reached up, trailing down his cheek as though caressing the open wounds inside him. The determination in her gaze melted into sorrow, and what defenses could he keep against her? He closed his eyes and leaned into her touch. I have spent my life running, hiding, cowering, she whispered, and I am done with it. I am done letting other people fight my battles for me. You mustn't believe that Fang Zedong isn't my battle. He kidnapped me. He tortured me. He manipulated and abused me. I watched him do horrible things. Don't you understand? I have believed so many lies about myself, that I am weak, helpless, useless, cursed. And if I run from Zedong, regardless of his threats, then I will only confirm those things. I couldn't live with myself, letting the opinions of others make me into a true coward. No, Shang, I must stay. But it doesn't mean I am not devastated. It does not mean that I don't love you. He wished he didn't understand, but he did. He hated that he did, that every time in his life he'd tried to hate Meiling, he couldn't do it. It would lessen the pain if he could blame her. All he could do was love her more. Loving her was life, and it was bitter agony. You must go, Meiling begged. Don't stay here for me. Please, Shang, do this for me. Tears glimmered in her eyes. I need to know you are safe and alive. Shang's heart shattered. It was a miracle he stayed on his feet. A miracle he did nothing but swipe away a tear sliding down her cheek with his thumb. He did something he so rarely did to her. He lied, and it burned like acid on his tongue. Then I will go. She offered him a shaky smile, her eyes glistening. Thank you. He tilted her chin up and kissed her, slowly, thoroughly, memorizing the shape of her lips, savoring her taste. His kisses were confessions, things he'd longed to tell her. I've wanted you in my arms for so long. You are the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. then his last kiss. "I love you, Meiling." The effort was monumental, but somehow he found the will to pull away. His voice was gravel as he whispered, "I'll take you back." He didn't have to specify he meant to the palace. She only nodded and smoothed back her hair before slipping her arm in his. They'd hardly made it 3 steps out of the darkness before something loud crashed nearby.
Chapter 28. The crash was like the sound of someone stumbling through shrubbery. Meiling tensed, Shang's head whipping toward the sound, his body braced. Her fingers were almost numb, but her cheeks and neck still burned. The crash turned into a whimpering cry. It struck Meiling as familiar. "Oh!" she cried, bursting forward.
Meiling!
Shang reached out and caught her again, but she twisted in his grasp. "It's Fei Yan!" she hissed, and immediately he released her. She ran out of the shadows, cold flooding where Shang's warmth had been only seconds ago. She shuddered, but she couldn't help being relieved at a distraction. Another groan came from the edge of the garden. There was an arm, a leg, sticking out of the shrubbery. "Fei Yan!" She redoubled her pace until she fell to her knees beside Fei Yan's fallen body. The healer moaned when Shang, immediately in action, gripped under her shoulders and dragged her into the grass, out of the plants. He laid her flat, and Meiling quickly kneeled over her, grabbing her hands. Cold. She tilted Fei Yan's head up and brushed the hair away from her puckered brow. Fei Yan moaned again, and her eyes flickered open. Midnight eyes stared unseeing up at the stars. "Fei Yan, can you hear me?" Meiling's voice broke, and she gripped that icy hand tighter. "Fei Yan, what's wrong? Tell me what's wrong." Where was that flowing golden river? Where was the life, the vitality? "Are you sick?" she urged, bending forward to press her hand to her forehead. Shang lifted his questioning gaze to hers. "She's very warm," she told him, gritting her teeth. "Of course she's sick, driven like a dog."
I saw her earlier today,
he said, frowning down at her.
She looked completely fine. Tired, but nothing like this.
Fei Yan's eyes flared open again, and her hand suddenly gripped like iron around Meiling's. Her gaze cleared, and a trickle of warmth flowed from her fingers. What? What, Fei Yan?" Meiling prompted, squeezing her hand tighter. "My head." Fei Yan's voice broke, and her eyes rolled back. "Fei Yan? Fei Yan? Her head, does she have a headache?" Shang, kneeling on the other side of her, said suddenly,
You said Feng Zedong was in your mind tonight. What if?
He didn't need to finish. "I need to fall asleep." She kept Fei Yan's hand clasped in hers while she glanced around the grass, searching the looming academy buildings for a safe spot.
There's hardly a private place around here,
Shang growled, already pulling Fei Yan up so he could lift her.
We can't risk someone finding you while you work.
Fei Yan's dormitory? What about the library? He shook his head as he heaved Fei Yan's limp body into his arms.
The dormitories are full. Anyone can walk into the library unexpectedly.
He pursed his lips and glanced sidelong at Meiling.
We could go to my room. It's not exactly appropriate, but no one will bother us there.
Qilins eat propriety, Meiling snapped. Where is it? Hurry! Shang raised an eyebrow and seemed to suppress a smile as he nodded.
Over there. Follow me. And be quiet.
He shifted Fei Yan so she was slung over his shoulder, arms and hair dangling, and held to the shadows as they crept around the side of the academy buildings. Meiling kept close to him, her hand hovering over Fei Yan's back. She found herself glancing over her shoulder every few breaths, watching for any sign of pursuit. Only the stillness of a winter night met her senses. This felt oddly familiar, and if Meiling closed her eyes, she could almost imagine she followed Shang through the bowels of Zedong's fortress. She tried to focus on keeping her exhale soft and even, despite her thumping heart. Tried to keep her teeth from chattering in her mouth. tried to keep herself from readjusting her robes for another shred of warmth. Shang loves me. He kissed me. He asked me to be his wife.
Here.
His low voice broke through her thoughts as he grunted and pushed open a door. Light flared from the room within, but he lifted his hand. The candles hissed and went out. He held the door open for her, and she strained to see by moonbeam until he shut the door firmly, ensconcing them in darkness.
I don't want anyone to see our silhouettes entering,
he explained.
I'll relight the candles. Here, help me set her down.
She followed the sound of his voice in the pitch black until she found an arm, Fei Yen's arm. Slowly, she supported Fei Yen's back as Shang kneeled. Together, they laid her down on the floor. Once, she thought her fingers brushed his, but it was too dark to tell. She stayed with Fei Yen as the floorboards creaked under his weight. She blindly stroked hair in the dark and held her friend's chilled hands as Shang shuffled around the room. Light flared, soft and hesitant. Enough for her to make out Shang's sharp profile. Enough for flickers of light and shadow to play across Fei Yen's closed eyes. Another candle flared, and she could look around the room. It was sparse, humble. A low platform bed was in one corner, a table in another, and a washstand on the far side. Now that she could see how small it was a wonder they hadn't banged their heads on the corners of the bed or table. We ought to move her to the bed, Meiling said, already trying to scoot her arm under Fei Yen's shoulders, as if she could pick her up.
The bed is for you, so you can fall asleep.
It's big enough for both of us. Here, can you help me? Before long, they had Fei Yen settled on the bed, her giving little moans every few minutes. Those moans were Meiling's lifeline. They assured her she was not too late. Quickly, she climbed up next to her and was about to lie down when Shang stopped her. He held out a vial in one hand.
It's actually for you. It was going to be a belated birthday present since you were in a dungeon on your birthday. I was going to give it to you at a better moment.
He drew a deep breath and pressed the small glass bottle into her palm.
Here. It's a potion that will help you fall asleep. I thought it would be preferred to...
To knocking me unconscious? Meiling said with a lifted brow. Shang's eyes met hers before he quickly looked away.
1 drop on your tongue is enough.
The potion worked quickly. Too quickly. She was asleep before she'd even removed her finger from her mouth, giving her no time to thank him for his sweet consideration and remembrance of her birthday. Her spirit went hurtling into the ether, just in time to hear Shang swear and leap to catch her before her head slammed hard into the bed frame. Good thing she'd corked the bottle, otherwise it would be spilled all over Shang's bed. She paused only for a heartbeat to watch him gently lower her head and shoulders to the cushion. Then she dove into Fei Yen's mind.